This is Cam Newton, and he is known for being the greatest quarterback in the history of the Carolina Panthers and the Auburn Tigers, where in one spectacular season, Cam Newton had established himself as the best player in the entire country. But many people don't know about the journey that Cam took in order to get to that level, along with the challenges faced and the lessons he had to learn in order to become the legend that he is today. So today, I will be putting Cam Newton into College Football 25. Let's take a look back on his journey through college as we follow him on his road to glory. Coming out of high school, Cam was actually the 5th ranked quarterback in his class, a few spots behind a particular quarterback who would play a role in his career later on. Regardless, as a top 5 quarterback, Cam had plenty of options, but he told one of his friends a few of the teams that he had in mind.
Where were your choices?
Oklahoma, Kansas State, Mississippi State.
But in the end, Cam had to really think about what he wanted out of his college experience.
Out of high school, I was looking for gear and a good time.
Right.
So as a freshman, when it came to Cam Newton's college decision, he decided to sign with Florida. Now, a little while after Cam Newton had arrived to the Florida campus, he knew he was going to be a backup, because at practice he wasn't showing everything that he needed to in order to surpass the current starter. So going into his first ever game against the UGF Pandas, he was getting approximately 0 playing time. And probably as a result of that, Cam started getting into other things like more partying, which ultimately led to him having less time to study for his classes. And for the remainder of his freshman season, he was forced to sit down on the bench, because the quarterback who was leading Florida at the moment would eventually go on to win the Heisman. And sitting behind a guy like Tim Tebow was probably what made Cam Newton lock in, because he was doing a lot better at practice and even did a good job staying away from questionable characters on his team. But even with all of the good decisions that Cam was starting to make, it would only take one bad decision to get him suspended. But not just that, because Cam Newton would also get arrested for theft, stealing another classmate's laptop and then getting caught because he chucked it out the window. But luckily for him, Cam didn't get in too much trouble though, because he would still be let back on the team, but unfortunately he would never become the full-time starter for Florida. So after a couple years, Cam Newton had to really think about his future, and ultimately he decided to go the JUCO route and play for Blinn College, a small school in Texas where Cam Newton would become a huge star. He basically became the Blinn Buccaneers' entire offense, and was capable of leading them to the JUCO National Championship, where unsurprisingly to many, Cam had been able to finish the job, helping to get Blinn a national title and earning himself a few offers from major top-ranked schools. So when it came to his upcoming decision for his final year of college football, Cam Newton decided to sign with Auburn. And now that Cam Newton is an Auburn Tiger, he's ready to lock in and try to get himself a chance at playing in the NFL. And that became very clear when he came out to practice, because he was absolutely dominating his teammates, making them look silly at every opportunity he could, so there was really no QB controversy this season for Auburn. Cam Newton was going to be the guy to lead them into their first game of the season, and he was just hoping to come away with the victory in his first matchup with the Tigers against the Baylor Bears. To start off this first game, Cam Newton in this Auburn offense actually had great field position, and he was definitely doing his best to take advantage of it, but Cam still needed a little bit of time before he got adjusted to this level of college football. But eventually Cam would start getting in the groove of things, because he was going out there and making plays in open space, breaking off tackles, and finding a bunch of green grass ahead of him as he was picking up a first down and more. He brought his team all the way downfield towards the red zone, where it would only be a couple plays later that he would drop back, find an open lane in front of him, and start running before he crossed over the goal line for the first points of the Auburn Tigers season. And he went out there and let people know that it is his time now, because this is where the legacy of Cam Newton really begins. Cam got the ball back in the second quarter and was able to find somebody open on the left side, who made the reception and somehow turned it up corner all the way towards the end zone for Cam Newton's first passing touchdown of the year, and extending this Auburn lead to 14-0. This Auburn defense was also playing well, because by halftime they still had Baylor at 0 points, and it was probably even more demoralizing for them when Cam was doing stuff like this, extending plays that ended up in huge completions downfield, and then talking his smack immediately after.
What they say in New York, is you dumb?
Unfortunately, this game was not all sunshine and rainbows for Cam, as he would eventually throw his first interception of the season, So he definitely still had a lot to learn from, but it seemed like he's willing to put in the work to get it done. And he continued to show that as he didn't stop playing until the final whistle, scrambling out of the pocket and powering his way across the goal line for another touchdown, coming up with his third of the game and doing enough to eventually put this one away, with the Auburn Tigers going on to win their first game of the season 24-0, led by a 200-yard and 3-touchdown performance from Cam Newton. But we also can't discount the extra 100 yards on the ground, proving that he could be a dominant force in the running game. And even though Cam Newton's name wasn't at a household level quite yet, he was looking to start this season strong and come away with back-to-back wins, as in his next game he was facing off against Southern Miss. Now, even though Auburn was down by 7 to start this game, Cam Newton was ready to do everything to get the lead, because he would go out there and say, "Hey," and stiff arm a poor fella into the ground before picking up a first down. And he was remaining extremely focused throughout the game, despite there being some otherworldly activities from the referees throughout this game, because he was eventually able to lead his team down towards the goal line. And on 3rd and goal, he passed for his first touchdown of the game and tied this one up at 7 apiece. But Cam didn't seem to be anywhere near done, because he would break loose, finding a bunch of green grass ahead of him before eventually diving into the end zone for a touchdown. That play right there looked like he put the entire College of Auburn on his back. But it was kind of funny because on the next possession, he would give it right back to Southern Miss, throwing another interception on his season on a poor pass across the middle. Regardless, Cam Newton was wheeling and dealing in this game, coming up with multiple big throws and leading his team down towards the end zone multiple times to close out this game. And it would eventually become a 33-14 victory, with Southern Miss's offense unable to keep up. And this time, Cam was able to go for 4 touchdowns, still with an extra 100+ yards on the ground. Now, even though Cam wasn't doing super well in school, he was doing just enough to get by, because he had to focus more of his time on getting better and being a leader for this team. The Tigers were seen to be a team that was one special quarterback away from being a national title contender. So they were going to need Cam Newton to continue to be as special as he was, especially going into their next game against FCS Midwest. Cam Newton had started out this game firing on all cylinders, delivering a strike towards the right side of the field that ended up as a completion, and the receiver was able to bring it in for a touchdown to get this game going. And at times, it seems like there was moments where Cam could just do things by himself, because he would just take off around the edge, and even with his own teammates in the way, he would still be able to get in the end zone for a touchdown, making it a 14-0 lead. But by the end of the first quarter, Cam still wasn't done slinging that rock and found his man open once again downfield for another score. And at this point, it was definitely already starting to look bad. But that was nothing compared to later on, where Auburn had a huge lead, and Cam Newton was still taking the liberty to roll out of the pocket and get his team across the goal line for another score to effectively put an end to this game. Auburn would go on to win this game 44-6, and Cam Newton would have as many touchdowns as his opponent had points, earning himself his first SEC Offensive Player of the Week in the process, and getting himself a little recognition as a potential Heisman favorite. But you see, Cam wasn't going to sit there and let any of that buzz get to him, because he knew he had to keep working to prepare for a long season ahead of him. And he just knew he had to keep playing well as he was heading into his next game against Northern Illinois. Now, one thing about Cam Newton is that there was always going to be people questioning whether or not he was a real quarterback, and it was probably because oftentimes he was throwing picks, and he was starting this game out with one of them. Luckily for them, though, it didn't stop their offense from being able to get down the field on the next drive, where Cam Newton would take this read option and waltz his way across the goal line for a touchdown, coming up with the score to take the lead 7-3. And it was looking like things were about to get better from there for Auburn, because even when they got held to 3rd down, Cam Newton was able to find a guy right across the middle while taking the hit, and get his team in the end zone once again, taking a 2-possession lead, so that after halftime, Cam Newton feels completely comfortable taking off with this ball and running all the way down the field before powering his way inside the 5-yard line for his team. And it really just became a game that was all about Cam, because by the end of it, they were up by 39 points and still scoring, doing way more than enough to put this game away, as Auburn would eventually go on to win 52-6. And Cam Newton had his best game yet, earning himself another Offensive Player of the Week. And he even had reporters asking him just how confident his offense was going into the week.
You know, you look at Benji, you look at anybody on this offense, we're not lacking confidence. Let's just say that.
The best part about all this is that Cam knew just how locked in he really was. He wasn't about to sit up here and go out and party no more, because he knew that he was on a mission, and he was actually about to enter into the toughest part of his schedule, starting off with his next matchup against 11th ranked Tennessee. Tennessee messed up early in this game, allowing Auburn to have great field position, and Cam Newton was doing his best to take advantage of it by getting around the edge, running down the sideline and diving towards the goal line before getting stopped inside the 3. It would only be one play later where Cam would finish what he started and walk across the goal line for a touchdown, taking the early 7-0 lead in a game against Tennessee that turned out to be a shootout. Or at least it looked like a shootout, because by the fourth quarter, this Cam Newton-led Auburn offense was absolutely piling it on. That boy Cam was dropping back to pass saying, just firing his missiles downfield, man, and somehow his wide receivers were booty butt cheeks naked wide open. And because of that, by the end of this game, it'd be a 38-17 victory for the Auburn Tigers, with Cam Newton having passed for over 400 yards, playing some of his best football in the biggest game of the year so far. And even with the extra 100 yards on the ground that he added again, Cam still doesn't feel like this is the best that he could possibly play. And he felt like his next game against South Carolina would be a great opportunity to step on the field and show the entire country exactly what Cam Newton can do. Now, it wouldn't take long for Cam Newton to show up in this game, and you can hear just how excited the announcer was when he did.
Newton keeps it, avoids 1 man at midfield, 45-40, 35-30, there goes Cam, 15, 10, 5, dives, touchdown, Auburn!
Cam was showing immediately that he was about to be a difference maker in this game, and that was further proven as he would later on drop back to pass and find a man wide open towards the left side of the field and delivered a dime, hitting his receiver for a huge catch and run that went all the way across the goal line for a score. And you can tell that this is starting to feel a little bit normal for Cam, especially after he goes out there a few drives later, looks towards the right side of the field, and delivers another strike over there, hitting another receiver who caught a ball to extend the lead. And even when Cam was off the field, his defense was scoring touchdowns. I mean, Cam Newton was clearly elevating his team to their max potential. He was making receivers who hadn't caught a ball all season look like they could start for LSU. And this offense didn't take their foot off the gas the entire game, even up to the final seconds in the fourth quarter where Cam Newton would take this ball across the goal line himself, scoring another touchdown to put this one away, with Auburn going on to win this game 54-17, led by Cam Newton, who went for 6 touchdowns throughout this game, earning himself a National Offensive Player of the Week. And he also got his team a little bit in the spotlight more, as they're now a top 5 ranked team in the country. And along with still being a betting favorite to potentially win the Heisman Trophy this year, Cam was feeling real good going into the back half of his season. And he just wanted to keep that momentum going into his next SEC matchup against Ole Miss. And to start this game off, he definitely was, because he delivered an absolute laser towards the right side of the field that went for a touchdown, getting his team going with a 7-point lead. And by the second quarter, he had actually managed to pass the 2,000-yard marker for the season. Now, that didn't mean that Cam didn't have a lot to work on, as he would eventually throw an interception in this game, taking some potential points off the board for Auburn, but he wasn't afraid to go right back out there and try to make that same play again, but better. This time, he completes the pass and gets his team in scoring position. But the type of player Cam was, I mean, he could pretty much play anything. So they decided to put him out there at wide receiver, and he mossed this cornerback, coming up with a big-time reception of all things to extend that Auburn lead. And Cam Newton was having an incredible game so far, but by the fourth quarter, he would start to make some mistakes, throwing an interception that most definitely took some points off the board. But then coming out on the very next drive with the game tied, fumbling the ball as he was trying to pick up a first down, eventually sending this game into overtime, where I guess Cam decided to turn it back on, because he would walk across the goal line for the first touchdown to take the lead. And after Ole Miss only scored a touchdown and a field goal, that allowed Auburn the opportunity to drive right back downfield and eventually get themselves in a situation where they would run across the goal line for another score and put an end to this SEC matchup, with the Tigers able to escape a close one 30-27, and Cam Newton leading the way with another 3 touchdowns. And you know what, speaking of his stats, taking a look at his season so far, he is actually one of the top passers in the nation, but also managed to get himself as a top 2 rusher in the nation. Cam Newton was absolutely dominating college football at this point, but it seems like things would start to change a little bit after his next game against Mississippi State. Now, this was a game where Auburn came out swinging early, making some nice completions downfield that eventually got them across the goal line for a touchdown, taking the early 7-0 lead until later on in that very same quarter, Cam delivered a strike on this quick slant, and the receiver was able to get across the goal line for a score, making this a 2-possession lead that would carry on all throughout the game. And even with Cam Newton coming out in the second half throwing an interception, it didn't really seem to matter, because Auburn would still go on to win this game 16-10. And even though this would go down as one of Cam's worst games, this was definitely going to be the least of his worries. Because his coach texted him and told him that he needed his entire family to come to his office, because there was about to be some damning allegations hitting the news cycle.
Surrounding the latest news with Cam Newton.
Well, Kevin, the NCAA is continuing its investigation, and of course,
Mississippi State's salty ass had made allegations that Cam Newton's family took over $100,000 for Cam to come to Auburn. And because of that, Cam was receiving a lot of negative attention that he knew he didn't deserve. He was actually suspended for 1 day pending investigation, just in time for him to come back and beat the brakes off of Texas. As even with the off-field things looming, Cam was still able to help come away with a 30-3 win. But the off-field stuff did affect him in other ways, causing him to miss class from time to time, but he knew there was going to be nothing that would allow him to miss an opportunity on the football field, especially after Cam Newton's father had taken the blame for taking money, even though allegedly that was never true. Apparently Cam's dad Cecil only did it just so Cam would be able to play, because Auburn had a huge game against LSU, and Cam Newton was lighting it up, not at all allowing the negative press that he's been receiving over the past couple weeks to get to him, making multiple plays throughout this game before eventually rushing across the goal line for a touchdown late in the fourth quarter, a score that would be enough to eventually put the game away. And as this season rolled on, football had really become Cam Newton's safe haven, and it was nice for him to actually go back to where he started his career, as he eventually had to match up against the Florida Gators. And although this wasn't a revenge game for Cam, the game also definitely didn't mean nothing. But he did go out there and play like it was any other game and dominated like he usually does. It just so happened to be in front of a crowd full of fans that could have had him playing quarterback if the team decided to start him a couple years earlier. Cam Newton would go on to beat his old team 28-7, leading Auburn into the final game of their regular season where they were about to play against Alabama. And it was bound to be a great matchup as Auburn was now the #1 team in the nation and was led by an incredible quarterback that, despite his ups and downs so far throughout his career, he had still yet to back down from a challenge or fail to give it his best shot. And something made a lot of people believe that that wasn't going to end in the Iron Bowl. Because to start this game off on the road, Cam Newton was showing that he was not messing around. Auburn was already up 2 possessions before halftime, but that was before Cam Newton would come out in the third quarter, pulling off some absolute nonsense. Literally running around the entire defense before making his way upfield, picking up a huge chunky yardage in the process and getting down inside the 5-yard line. Probably one of Cam's best plays of the season so far, but that drive would only end in 3 points. There would be another drive later on in the fourth quarter though that would end very quickly, because after Cam Newton delivers an absolute dot upfield, hitting his receiver in stride for a touchdown, that would be enough to close out this Iron Bowl and put this game away, as Auburn goes on to win this one 24-14. And for the first time in a while, Auburn was looking at a chance to win an SEC championship. And it was all led by a quarterback who was potentially on his way to winning the school's first ever Heisman Trophy. With 1 game left before bowl season, Cam Newton had over 3,000 yards passing and a whopping 1,300 yards rushing. An absolute diabolical demon Swiss Army knife monster of a quarterback. And he was looking to try and keep his undefeated season alive, as he led them into the SEC championship game against Georgia. This offense all year had no problem moving up and down the field, and that didn't change in this game, as early on they were able to get right down the field and get across the goal line for a 7-0 lead. And after being given excellent field position on the following drive, it would only be a couple plays later that Cam would find somebody underneath who got themselves around the edge and up into the end zone for a score, giving Auburn now a 2-possession lead over what's supposed to be one of the best teams in the country. But the way that Cam was playing against Georgia this game, you would definitely believe that Georgia was the best high school team in the country. You know, like they was doing all right. They had 14 points at some point. But when Cam Newton was able to just roll out to his right and create the time to find somebody wide open and get across the goal line for a touchdown, there wasn't much you can do to defend that. And that's probably why Cam Newton would lead his team to an SEC championship, winning this game 37-14, and for one of the first time in the history of the Auburn Tigers, completing a perfect regular season. But now that the season is over and Auburn is SEC champs, it's time for some awards to be given out. And Auburn's offensive coordinator actually wins the Best Coordinator award. And unsurprisingly to many throughout the entire regular season, Cam Newton would end up winning Player of the Year, becoming the first one ever in the history of Auburn's program, along with their first ever Heisman Trophy. And even though most of the season people knew that he would probably win it, it doesn't make it any less crazy considering all that he's been able to accomplish. And rightfully so, he would go on to win a bunch of other awards. But at this point, this wasn't what was really on Cam's mind anymore, because he had his sights set on something bigger. He had an opportunity to lead his team to a national championship, and he was going to do his very best to make sure that he got his team there, starting off with the first round of the playoffs against Oklahoma. Early on, Cam Newton had their initial offensive drive rolling, delivering a strike towards the right side of the field that went for a first down, and eventually led the team all the way up towards the goal line, where on 1st and goal, Cam Newton stood in the pocket and delivered a dime, putting the first points on the board for Auburn in this game and making it 7-3, which is where it stood all the way up until the second quarter. But Cam Newton was doing a great job rolling out of the pocket saying, hey, picking up first downs, moved his team all the way down towards the goal line once again before powering across it for another touchdown to extend Auburn's lead to 2 possessions. After halftime though, this game started to get a little bit close with Oklahoma only down 3 now. But for the first time all game, Cam was able to take a shot over the top. And he actually connected with a wide receiver who was now streaking down the sideline and made his way all the way downfield towards the goal line. And on the very next play, Cam Newton would drop back to pass with a pretty clean pocket and fire it into the end zone for a touchdown, extending their lead back to 2 possessions and taking control in this game. So that by the time the fourth quarter rolled around, Auburn still had the 2-possession lead. And with another throw by Cam Newton that just happened to be a touchdown and be the score needed to ultimately put this game away, as Auburn would go on to win this game 35-18 with the help of Cam Newton's 5 touchdowns. But there was still more work to do because Cam and the Auburn Tigers had to play against the Oregon Ducks in the Sugar Bowl, which I'm sure most of you remember at one point was considered the BCS National Championship. But regardless, Cam Newton came locked in because he was one step closer to finishing off a perfect season. Now Cam realized pretty early on that this might be a different game than others because the Ducks were playing great defense against the Tigers to start this game off. But unfortunately for Oregon, I guess Auburn's defense was playing a little bit better because they give Auburn excellent field position to start off their next drive. And on this 3rd and goal, Cam Newton was able to find a man open in the end zone for the first points of the game, capitalizing on the excellent field position, and he was looking to do the exact same thing after getting great field position on the next drive. Cam went out there and delivered a shot to the left side of the field that got snagged for a touchdown. And reasonably so, Cam was pretty hyped because now Auburn had a 2-possession lead. And halfway through the second quarter, with Oregon still having no points on the board, Cam was using his legs to move the sticks and get his team in great field position, eventually bringing it back to the goal line where he would hand it off to his running back and he would plunge his way into the end zone for another score, giving Auburn now a 3-possession lead. And now even with horrible field position, Cam Newton is still looking to take a shot. And somehow, he's actually able to connect on this pass and this wide receiver is streaking towards the end zone for another score. Except he doesn't score because he gets stopped inside the 10. But it was all good because literally only a play later that Cam Newton rolled out right, found a man open in the back of the end zone and delivered a perfect ball for a touchdown, now making this a 28-0 game, and having already done enough to send the Auburn Tigers to the national championship, as Auburn would go on to beat the brakes off of Oregon 42-3, and Cam Newton would earn himself a Sugar Bowl trophy, largely due to his 4 touchdowns and almost 300-yard performance in the first half. But now that Cam had finally led the Auburn Tigers to the national championship, he knew that he had one more mission lying ahead, so he got ready to lead his team into the final game of the season, as the Auburn Tigers were about to face off against the Texas Tech Red Raiders. We started out this game with Cam throwing a strike towards the right side of the field, and it ended up being a completion for a first down. He led his way down towards the goal line on this opening drive and was able to escape right out the pocket before eventually just jogging his way in the end zone for a touchdown. Unfortunately though, with the way Texas Tech was playing, it was looking like this was about to be a shootout. So Cam was doing his best to work his magic with his legs and his arm, throwing a ball up towards the left side of the field that was eventually caught for a touchdown, giving Auburn the lead right back, and they were feeling pretty good, but Texas Tech clearly mean business. And they proved it because they were starting to annihilate Cam in the pocket. But it was a good thing that Cam Newton had something for that though, because he caught the defenders lacking and decided to take another deep shot. And it ended up being another reception for another touchdown, giving Auburn a little bit more momentum going forward throughout the second half. But the Red Raiders didn't seem like they were interested in allowing Cam back in the end zone. Looking back on it though, if they felt that way, maybe they should have played better defense, because Cam Newton delivers an easy strike up the seam that turned into a long touchdown to make this game a 2-possession lead. But with Texas Tech fighting back hard, Cam knew that he really could not stop there. So he continued to try to make plays downfield and ultimately led his team down towards the goal line. where Cam was able to create just enough time to get this ball out to his left, where the receiver brought it across for another touchdown, putting it back to a 2-possession lead and giving Auburn full control of this game. And after getting the ball back once again with Texas Tech failing to score, all it would take was a run commit from this defense to allow everything open over the top, and now Cam Newton was connected deep for another touchdown late in the fourth quarter of this game, closing the door on any hopes for Texas Tech. And this is where Cam Newton's legacy as an Auburn Tiger was cemented forever. Because the Auburn Tigers would go on to win their second national championship since 1957. And it was all led by a quarterback who had fought through so much growth and adversity, finding a way to shut out all kinds of noise just to lead his team to this moment. And in a game that will forever be remembered by many, Cam Newton became a legend. As far as season stats including the playoffs, Cam Newton went for over 5,000 yards and 60 touchdowns, just absolutely dominating at the highest level, becoming a top 5 passer and the #1 rusher in the country. And it was no surprise that he would go on to break multiple Auburn records like passing yards, rushing touchdowns, and passing touchdowns in a season. But this was the story of Cam Newton's college career. And if you want to see more videos like this, I have actually learned recently that the best way to do this is to like the video and click one of the videos that pop up on the screen, because apparently that's how the algorithm knows that my videos are worth watching. And I genuinely believe that I can go far with this one day, so if you could help a brother out, I appreciate it. But be sure to subscribe to the channel to see all my future content, and comment down below who else you guys want to see next. But other than that, I'm gonna catch you guys next time.